Children, our today's topic and tutorial is about arguments which are used for functions. So we discuss about the different arguments, different types of arguments. An argument is one or a set of parameters which are passed while defining the function or while calling the functions, or depending on where they have been specified, we categorize them as of different types. So we'll see them one by one. Now the first category is about actual arguments. We had two types of arguments. The actual arguments, uh, whenever we call any function, we need to pass a set of arguments. These are finite about the number of arguments. They are also very specific as what will be their data type, because when the function is called, the set of arguments must match with the set of arguments used in the signature or prototype of function, because only in that case the interpreter will execute them, otherwise it will report an error. So the number of arguments must be same, as well as sequence one by one. The first argument must match about both there in the actual as well as there in the header. They must match about the data type. Similarly, the second argument must also match in the calling statement and in the defining statement there, and similarly in the third, and so on one by one. So all the argument, they must match about the data type also. So that's why the data type of each actual argument must be same as that of the relevant formal argument for the function called or invoked. So these are the properties of actual arguments. Let's see what's next. The next is formal arguments. The way there is a set of arguments while calling the function. Similarly, when the function is defined, if it's a user defined function, or if there is a function which has been specified there in libraries, or it's a inbuilt function, there also the function header has a set of arguments, and those arguments are said as formal arguments. All the formal arguments, they receive their values from the actual arguments which are specified when the function is called by the user. Again, this is very specific, that here also we should talk the number of actual arguments must match with the number of formal arguments specified in the header. Similarly, the data type also must match. Data type of the arguments specified in the actual set while calling the function, they must match about the data type of the arguments specified in the function definition. So whichsoever the arguments are there in function definition, they are said as formal arguments. Now we need to take an example to understand this. So this is an image. Here we can see different statements. Let's see one by one. At the last, the function has been called here. There are two arguments and p and q. Both of these will be said as actual arguments. The upper part, there the function has been defined, and since the function definition header exists there, so a, b are passed there and will be said as formal arguments. The moving arrow shows the block, the function block, and the block contains a set of statements which will be there in the function definition. So this is about the explanation about actual arguments and formal arguments which are present in different statements and while writing a program. Other than this, there is one very special category which is common about actual arguments and formal arguments. This is default. A default argument is the one which has been assigned an initial value in the function header. The use or the importance of such argument is that when the user or programmer makes a call to the function and skips the value for actual argument, even in that condition or state, the function is executed by the interpreter, because the skipped value is accessed from the function header where the default value exists. But there are certain rules for these. One thing we said that these are default values because they are initially assigned with a default values. Arguments have some default values. Now parameters can be assigned default values from the last in argument section of the function header. I repeat, the arguments in the function header, they can be assigned default values but has a specific order that unless the last or the next one has a default value, the previous argument cannot be assigned a default value. That means if there are two arguments in a function header, so the first argument can be assigned a default value only in case the second argument, the second formal argument stands with a default value. So if it is there, and if there, for an example, we'll see in this code, again there's a image example. The last two statements, these are function call statements, and there two arguments have been passed in the first function call statement. In the second function call statement, there is only one argument. So what's next? If we see at the top, the green box, it is a formal argument, and the blinking box, red color box, it says that this is default argument. Now this is valid because it is at the next in sequence. A is the first argument for one function and B is the second argument. So this is valid, this is allowed. What is not correct, A cannot be assigned a default value without assigning a default value to B. That was what I was talking about. Now the use of such a specification or a default value. When we are calling the function funname, and if we are passing both the values and x and y there, so A and B, they will be getting values from x and y. But say in case we are not passing the second argument while calling the function, that means we are not specifying the second actual argument. So what will happen, the interpreter will access the value of B and will use B as the second argument to execute the second call, second invoke to the function. So this is an benefit or advantage of having a default argument in any function. Other than this, these are different parts. There's a function definition part having some statements, and the rest I have explained.